sun was a blazing orb in the sky, casting waves of heat over the endless stretch of desert highway. The air shimmered with mirage-like illusions, and the sand stretched far beyond what the eye could see. It was harsh, unforgiving land, but, for one man, it had become home, or at least a place to try and rebuild his life. This man wasn't just anyone. He was someone who knew engines inside out, someone whose hands carried years of experience turning wrenches and fixing machines that others thought were beyond repair. Life hadn't been easy for him, though. Back in the city where he grew up, he'd run a small garage, a dream come true after years of hard work. But dreams have a way of slipping through your fingers when you least expect it. Rising costs, unexpected repairs, and bad luck eventually forced him to shut down. With nothing left to lose, he packed up his tools, loaded them into an old tow truck, and headed west, hoping the open road might lead to something better. Arizona seemed like a fresh start at first. The desert offered wide-open spaces, quiet, nights under star-filled skies, and a chance to escape the noise of the crowded streets he once called home. But as weeks turned into months, reality hit hard. His roadside repair shop, a tiny shack made from scrap metal and determination, was barely scraping by. Customers were few and far between, and those who did stop often haggled over prices or complained about the wait. Every day felt like a test of endurance, not just against the brutal heat, but also against the creeping doubt that whispered in his ear. What if this is as good as it gets? On this particular afternoon, he sat slumped against the side of his beat-up tow truck, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. His clothes clung to him, damp with perspiration, and dust coated his boots. The highway ahead was empty, save for the occasional tumbleweed rolling lazily across the cracked asphalt. Business had been slower than usual, and frustration bubbled beneath the surface. Was all this effort really worth it? Could he keep going like this day after day, living paycheck to paycheck while his family hoped for a brighter future? Just as he started to sink deeper into his thoughts, a faint rumble broke the silence. At first he thought it might be another mirage playing tricks on him, but then he saw it. A sleek black car gliding smoothly along the highway. As it approached, however, its smooth glide faltered. The engine sputtered, coughed, and finally gave out altogether, leaving the vehicle stranded right outside his shop. The driver stepped out, looking every bit out of place in this barren landscape. Dressed in a tailored suit, polished shoes, and a tie that probably cost more than the mechanic's entire outfit, the stranger stood there squinting at the horizon before turning his attention to the broken-down car. There was an air of authority about him, a confidence that suggested he wasn't used to being stuck anywhere. Not in business, not in life, and certainly not on some God-forsaken desert road. "I need help," the man said, his tone clipped, but polite. "My car broke down. I'm heading to Phoenix for an important meeting. Can you fix it?" The mechanic nodded without hesitation. This was what he did best, fixing problems other people couldn't. Despite the weariness weighing him down, he grabbed his toolbox and got to work. Underneath the hood of the luxury sedan, wires tangled like spaghetti, and parts gleamed with precision engineering. To someone less skilled, it might have looked intimidating, even impossible to repair. But for him, it was just another puzzle waiting to be solved. As he worked, the two men exchanged words. The stranger introduced himself as a CEO, explaining how his company was one of the biggest names in technology. The mechanic listened intently, sharing bits of his own story, the struggles, the failures, the hopes still clinging to him despite everything. They came from different worlds, yet somehow their conversation flowed naturally, bridging the gap between them. Hours passed, and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. By the time the mechanic tightened the last bolt and wiped his hands clean, the car purred like new again. The CEO handed over payment, more than generous for such a remote location, but paused before getting back behind the wheel. "You're talented," he said, his voice carrying genuine admiration. "Don't let this place hold you back." Those words lingered in the mechanic's mind long after the car disappeared into the distance. At the moment, they felt like nothing more than kind encouragement. What he didn't realize was that this Chance encounter would soon change his life in ways he never imagined. The mechanic stood there for a moment, watching the sleek black car disappear into the distance. The CEO's parting words echoed in his mind. "Don't let this place hold you back." It was a simple sentence, but it carried weight. Still, as he turned back to his tiny roadside shop, reality hit him like a punch to the gut. The desert wasn't just holding him back. It felt like it was swallowing him whole. His tools were worn, his equipment outdated, and his bank account barely scraping by. Those words of encouragement were nice, sure, but they didn't pay the bills or put food on the table. Days passed and life returned to its usual rhythm, or lack thereof. The highway remained eerily quiet, with only the occasional traveler stopping for gas or directions. Business was slow, painfully so. He spent most of his time tinkering with old parts, trying to make something useful out of scraps, or sitting in the shade of his tow truck, staring at the endless stretch of road. His wife often reminded him that their kids deserved better. She wasn't wrong, but what could he do? Moving somewhere else would mean starting over again, and he didn't have the energy or the money for that. Then one morning, something unusual happened. A large delivery truck pulled up outside his shop, its engine rumbling like thunder against the quiet desert backdrop. The driver hopped out, clipboard in hand, and asked if he was the owner of the repair shop. Confused, the mechanic nodded. "Sign here," the driver said, handing over a form. Before he could ask what was going on, the back doors of the truck swung open, revealing crates upon crates of brand-new equipment. Curiosity quickly turned to disbelief as he opened the first box. Inside were state-of-the-art diagnostic tools, things he'd only seen in catalogs and dreamed about owning. Another crate held advanced repair gear, including hydraulic lifts and welding machines that would have cost him months' worth of earnings. But the biggest surprise came when the driver rolled out a shiny new tow truck, gleaming under the harsh desert sun. It was a beast of a machine, built to handle anything the road threw at it. His hands trembled as he sifted through the items, each discovery more jaw-dropping than the last. Finally, he found a letter tucked inside one of the boxes. It was handwritten, signed by none other than the CEO whose car he had fixed days earlier. The note read, "You may not realize it, but your talent and determination left a lasting impression on me. I've been where you are, fighting to keep my head above water, wondering if things will ever get better. You helped me when I needed it most, and now I want to help you. Use these resources to build the future you envision. Keep pushing forward. You never know who's watching." For a long moment, the mechanic couldn't move. He stood there, clutching the letter, feeling a mix of emotions he couldn't quite untangle. Gratitude, shock, disbelief. They all swirled together until tears welled up in his eyes. This wasn't just a gift. It was a lifeline. Someone, a complete stranger, had seen value in him when even he had started to doubt himself. Word spread quickly around town. In a small community like this, news traveled fast. People whispered about the mechanic who had caught the attention of a billionaire CEO. Local newspapers picked up the story, dubbing him the Desert Miracle Worker. Overnight, his little roadside shop became a point of interest. Travelers passing through stopped not just for repairs, but to meet the man whose kindness had earned him such an incredible reward. With the new tools and equipment, he expanded his services. No longer limited to basic fixes, he could now handle complex repairs for luxury vehicles and high-performance engines. Word of mouth brought in more customers than he'd ever imagined possible. Some came from nearby towns, others from hundreds of miles away, all eager to see the mechanic everyone was talking about. For the first time in years, business was booming. But success didn't change him. If anything, it made him more determined to give back. He remembered how lonely and desperate he'd felt during his darkest days, how much he'd craved a helping hand. Now that he had one, he vowed to extend the same kindness to others. He started offering free checkups for locals who couldn't afford regular maintenance. He gave advice to young people interested in learning the trade, showing them the ropes, and encouraging them to pursue their dreams. Of course, not everyone was happy about his sudden rise. Some competitors resented the attention he was getting. They spread rumors, claiming he didn't deserve the help he'd received, or accusing him of cutting corners to undercut their prices. At first, the negativity stung. He'd worked too hard, to be dragged down by jealousy and spite. But instead of retaliating, he doubled down on what mattered most, doing good work and treating people right. Slowly but surely, his reputation won out. Customers trusted him because he delivered results, and because they saw the genuine care he put into every job. One day, while working on a customer's car, he noticed a familiar face walking toward him. It was the CEO, the man who had changed everything with a single act of generosity. The mechanic straightened up, wiping grease from his hands as the CEO approached. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by," the CEO said with a warm smile. "I wanted to see how things were going." The mechanic shook his head, still overwhelmed by the sight of the man standing before him. I don't even know what to say," he admitted. "You've done so much for me. I can't thank you enough." The CEO waved off the gratitude. "You don't need to thank me. You earned this. Your skill and perseverance spoke for themselves. Besides, I've been keeping tabs on you. From what I hear, you're making quite the impact around here." They talked for hours, sharing stories and ideas. The CEO explained that he'd been inspired by the mechanic's journey and was planning to launch a foundation aimed at supporting small businesses in underserved areas. "You reminded me why I started my company, to make a difference," he said. "And now I want to help others do the same." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert floor, the mechanic felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. This wasn't just about fixing cars anymore. It was about proving that no matter how tough things got, there was always a way forward. And sometimes all it took was one person believing in you to set everything in motion. The next morning he woke up early, energized in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. The desert was still the same unforgiving place it had always been, but somehow, it felt different now. The horizon seemed wider, the possibilities endless. As he walked to his shop, he couldn't help but smile. Life had thrown him curveballs, but he was finally ready to swing for the fences. The mechanic woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. The desert sun was already climbing, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and gold. He stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air, and looked around at his shop. It wasn't just a repair shop anymore, it felt like the beginning of something bigger. The new tools, the tow truck, the growing number of customers, everything pointed to a brighter future. But deep down, he knew this was more than just about fixing cars. This was about proving to himself and to everyone else that no matter how hard life gets, there's always a way forward. That day, as he worked on a customer's vehicle, he couldn't stop thinking about the CEO's words. "You reminded me why I started my company, to make a difference." Those words stuck with him. They weren't just nice compliments, they were a challenge. A challenge to use what he'd been given, not just the tools and equipment, but also the second chance, to do something meaningful. He realized that success wasn't just about making money or earning recognition. It was about leaving a mark, helping others and building something that would last long after he was gone. As the weeks went by, he threw himself into his work with renewed energy. Every car that came into his shop became an opportunity, not just to fix an engine, but to connect with people. He started taking extra time with each customer, listening to their stories, offering advice when they needed it. Some were travelers passing through, while others were locals struggling to make ends meet. To them, he wasn't just a mechanic. He was someone who cared, someone who understood what it meant to fight for a better life. But it didn't stop there. He began noticing young kids hanging around his shop, curious about the tools and machines. At first, they'd peek in from a distance, too shy to approach. But he encouraged them to come closer, showing them how things worked and answering their endless questions. Before long, a small group of teenagers started showing up regularly, eager to learn. They came from all walks of life. Some wanted to be mechanics, others just needed a place to belong. For the mechanic, this was where the real magic happened. Teaching these kids gave him a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. He remembered what it was like to be their age, full of dreams, but unsure how to turn them into reality. So, he decided to take things a step further, using the skills he'd honed over decades. He started an informal training program right there in his shop. Every evening after the last customer left, he'd gather the kids and teach them the basics of auto repair. He showed them how to diagnose problems, replace parts, and handle tools safely. More importantly, he taught them the value of hard work, patience, and perseverance. Word spread quickly, and soon parents from the community began bringing their children to his sessions. What started as a few curious teenagers grew into a proper class, with kids lining up outside his shop every evening. The mechanic didn't charge a penny for these lessons. Knowledge shouldn't cost anything, he told anyone who asked. If I can help even one of these kids build a better future, then I've done my job. Despite his growing reputation, challenges still came knocking. Not everyone was happy about his success. Some local competitors resented the attention he was getting and tried to undermine him at every turn. Rumors spread that he was cutting corners or using underhanded tactics to steal customers. Others accused him of being too big for his boots, as if helping people somehow made him less deserving of respect. At first, the negativity hurt. He'd worked too hard to let jealousy bring him down, but instead of fighting back, he chose to rise above it. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, his wife reminded him one night over dinner. Just keep doing what you're doing. People will see the truth eventually. Her words hit home. He realized that his actions spoke louder than any rumor ever could. If he stayed focused on delivering quality work and treating people right, the rest would fall into place. And it did. Slowly but surely, the negativity faded. Customers trusted him because he delivered results, and because they saw the genuine care he put into every job. Even some of his critics softened over time, admitting that maybe they'd been too quick to judge. One competitor even approached him one day, hat in hand, asking for advice on running their own business. The mechanic welcomed them with open arms, sharing tips and tricks without hesitation. After all, there was enough room for everyone to succeed. Months passed, and the mechanic's influence continued to grow. His little roadside shop became more than just a place to fix cars. It was a hub of hope and opportunity. Families stopped by not just for repairs, but to chat, share meals, or simply enjoy the sense of community he'd created. Strangers passing through often remarked on how special the place felt, like a hidden gem in the middle of nowhere. For many, it was a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. Then, one day, another unexpected visitor arrived. It was the CEO again, stepping out of a sleek car that gleamed under the desert sun. The mechanic wiped his hands on a rag and greeted him with a wide smile. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon," he joked. The CEO chuckled. "I couldn't stay away. I've been hearing great things about what you're doing here. Thought I'd come see it for myself." Together they walked around the shop, the mechanic pointing out the improvements he'd made and introducing the CEO to some of the kids in his training program. The CEO listened intently, nodding as the mechanic explained his vision for the future. "This is exactly what I hoped would happen," the CEO said finally. "You're not just fixing cars, you're changing lives, and I want to help you take it to the next level." The mechanic blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean," the CEO replied, "that we're going to build something bigger, something that can reach even more people. With your expertise and my resources, we can create a training center, a place where anyone, no matter where they come from, can learn a trade and build a better future." For a moment, the audio mechanic was speechless. He'd dreamed of expanding his efforts, of reaching more people, but he never imagined it could happen on such a grand scale. The idea of partnering with someone like the CEO felt surreal, almost too good to be true. But as they stood there, surrounded by the hum of engines and the laughter of kids learning new skills, he realized that this was just the beginning. That night, as he sat under the stars with his wife, he reflected on how far he'd come. From struggling to keep his shop afloat to becoming a beacon of hope for his community, the journey had been anything but easy. But it had been worth it. Every late night, every drop of sweat, every ounce of doubt, it had all led to this moment. And now, with the CEO's support, he was ready to dream even bigger. The desert was still the same unforgiving place it had always been, but somehow, it felt different now. The horizon seemed wider, the possibilities endless. As he gazed up at the star-filled sky, he whispered a silent thank you to the CEO, to his family, to the community that had embraced him, and to the universe for giving him a second chance. Life had thrown him curveballs, but he was finally ready to swing for the fences. The idea of building a training center felt like a dream too big to grasp, but the mechanic knew better than to let doubt creep in. He'd been through enough tough times to understand that dreams only come true when you roll up your sleeves and get to work. So with the CEO's support, he dove headfirst into planning. They met regularly, sketching out designs for the facility, discussing budgets, and brainstorming ways to make it accessible to as many people as possible. It wasn't just about creating a space. It was about building something that would inspire, hope, and change lives. The mechanic spent hours talking to locals, asking what they needed most. Some wanted courses on auto repair, while others suggested classes in welding or electrical work. A few even mentioned life skills, how to manage money, write a resume, or prepare for job interviews. The more he listened, the clearer his vision became. This wouldn't just be a training center for mechanics. It would be a place where anyone could learn a trade, gain confidence, and take control of their future. As plans took shape, excitement spread through the community. People started volunteering their time and resources. A local carpenter offered to help with construction. A retired teacher signed up to lead workshops on communication and leadership. Even kids from the mechanics' evening classes pitched in, painting murals and planting trees around the site. What had once been an empty lot at the edge of town slowly transformed into something extraordinary, a symbol of what could happen when people came together with a shared purpose. But not everything went smoothly. Building something so ambitious came with its own set of challenges. Permits were delayed, materials didn't arrive on time, and there were days when it felt like the project might fall apart before it even began. The mechanic often found himself lying awake at night staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was biting off more than he could chew. There were moments when doubt whispered in his ear, "Who are you to think you can pull this off? You're just a mechanic from the desert." On one particularly rough day, when yet another delivery was late and funds were running low, he sat outside the half-built structure, feeling defeated. His wife joined him, handing over a cup of coffee. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," she said softly. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Maybe I am. This is supposed to be about helping people, but right now it feels like I'm failing them." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do you remember why you started this? It wasn't because it was easy. It was because it mattered. And look around you. All these people showing up, working alongside you. That's proof that you're doing something right." Her words hit home. He glanced around the site and saw exactly what she meant. Volunteers were busy hammering nails, mixing cement, and hauling supplies. Kids from the training program were sweeping floors and organizing tools. Everyone was pitching in, not because they had to, but because they believed in the vision. For the first time in days, he smiled. Maybe the road ahead was bumpy, but he wasn't walking it alone. Slowly but surely, progress picked up speed. Walls went up, classrooms took shape, and equipment arrived piece by piece. The mechanic worked tirelessly, juggling his responsibilities, at the shop with overseeing the construction. Despite the long hours, he never lost sight of why he was doing this. Every beam laid, every tool unpacked, brought them closer to opening the doors to a brighter future. Finally, after months of hard work, the day arrived. The training center stood tall and proud, a beacon of hope against the vast desert backdrop. Its walls were painted bright colors chosen by the kids who had helped build it. Inside, classrooms buzzed with energy, equipped with everything needed to teach a wide range of skills. There was a state-of-the-art workshop for auto repair, a fully stocked welding station, and even a computer lab donated by the CEO's company. Outside, a garden flourished, planted by volunteers who wanted to add beauty to the space. The grand opening was set for a Saturday morning, and the entire community turned out to celebrate. Families gathered under tents decorated with streamers, sharing food and laughter. Local musicians played lively tunes, filling the air with joy. When the mechanic stepped up to speak, the crowd fell silent, eager to hear what he had to say. "Today isn't just about cutting ribbons or opening doors," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's about proving that no matter where you come from, no matter how tough things get, you have the power to create change. This place belongs to all of us, to everyone who showed up, worked hard, and believed in something bigger than themselves." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "I used to think success was about making it on your own, but I was wrong. Success is about lifting others up, giving them the tools they need to chase their dreams. That's what this center is all about. Whether you want to fix cars, weld metal, or learn how to run a business, this is your chance to start fresh. And if we do our jobs right, this won't just change individual lives, it'll change the whole community." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing across the desert. As the mechanic stepped down, the CEO approached him, clapping him on the back. "You've done something incredible here," he said. "This is just the beginning." In the weeks that followed, the training center became a cornerstone of the community. Students poured in from nearby towns, eager to enroll in classes. Some came looking for careers, while others simply wanted to learn new skills. The mechanic made sure no one was turned away, finding ways to accommodate everyone regardless of their background or circumstances. Scholarships covered tuition for those who couldn't afford it, and flexible schedules allowed parents and part-time workers to attend. The impact rippled outward. Graduates of the program opened their own businesses, hired friends and family, and reinvested in the community. One former student started a mobile repair service, driving to remote areas to fix vehicles for people who couldn't reach the shop. Another opened a small cafe near the training center, providing meals for students and staff. Each success story added to the growing list of reasons why the mechanic's gamble had paid off. Even the skeptics softened over time. Those who had doubted him now admitted that he'd done something remarkable, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. Competitors who once resented his success began collaborating with him, realizing that they could achieve more together than apart. The mechanic welcomed them with open arms, always ready to share advice or lend a hand. After all, he knew firsthand how much difference a little support could make. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the mechanic stood outside the training center, watching the lights flicker on inside. Students moved between classrooms, laughing and chatting as they learned new skills. Parents waited patiently outside, pride shining in their eyes. It was a scene he never could have imagined when he first set up his tiny roadside shop. Back then, survival had been the goal. Now thriving was the reality. His wife joined him, wrapping an arm around his waist. "Looks like you built more than a training center," she said with a smile. "You built a legacy." He nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. Legacy wasn't a word he used lightly, but maybe she was right. This wasn't just about fixing engines anymore. It was about proving that kindness, determination, and a willingness to help others could spark monumental change. As the stars emerged in the night sky, twinkling like tiny reminders of infinite possibilities, the mechanic felt a deep sense of peace. Life hadn't been easy, but every challenge had led him here, to a place where dreams weren't just possible, they were within reach. And as long as he kept pushing forward, encouraging others to do the same, the ripple effect would continue, spreading far beyond the desert sands. As the weeks turned into months, the training center became more than just a building. It became a heartbeat for the community. People from all walks of life walked through its doors, each carrying their own stories, struggles, and dreams. Some came with clear goals in mind, to learn a trade, start a business, or provide better for their families. Others arrived unsure of what they wanted, but desperate for a chance to turn things around. The mechanic watched it all unfold with a mix of pride and humility. He had started this journey hoping to help a few people, but now he saw how far-reaching the impact could be. Every morning as the sun rose over the desert, the center buzzed with activity. In one classroom, students huddled around laptops, learning how to design websites and troubleshoot software issues. In another, sparks flew as welding students practiced their techniques under the watchful eye of an experienced instructor. Downstairs, the auto repair workshop hummed with the sound of drills, wrenches, and engines roaring back to life. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos, the kind that happens when people are given tools and opportunities to shape their futures. The mechanic made it a point to spend time with every group, checking in on their progress and offering guidance where needed. He loved seeing the spark in someone's eyes when they figured out how to solve a problem or mastered a new skill. To him, those moments were worth more than any paycheck or recognition. They reminded him why he'd fought so hard to make this place a reality. One of his favorite parts of the day was sitting down with students during lunch breaks. He'd grab a sandwich or a cup of coffee and join them at picnic tables outside the center. These informal chats gave him a chance to connect with them on a personal level. He learned about their lives, the challenges they faced, the sacrifices they'd made, and the hopes they held on to despite everything. Sometimes they shared stories of loss or hardship. Other times they talked about their dreams of owning a garage, becoming an entrepreneur, or even going back to school. No matter what they said, the mechanic listened without judgment, offering advice or simply being there to hear them out. Through these conversations, he realized something important. Success wasn't just about teaching skills, it was about helping people believe in themselves again. Many of the students who came to the center carried scars, emotional wounds from years of struggling, doubting themselves, or feeling like they didn't belong anywhere. Some had dropped out of school or grown up in households where ambition was discouraged. Others had been told repeatedly that they weren't good enough. But here, surrounded by supportive instructors and peers, they began to see themselves differently. They started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were capable of greatness. Take Maria, for example. She was a single mother of two who worked double shifts at a diner just to keep food on the table. When she first enrolled in the program, she barely spoke above a whisper, afraid of making mistakes or looking foolish. But over time, she blossomed. Under the mechanic's mentorship, she discovered a knack for diagnosing engine problems. By the end of her course, she was confidently explaining complex repairs to customers and even mentoring newer students. Her transformation inspired everyone around her, including the mechanic himself. Then there was James, a teenager who had spent most of his life getting into trouble. His parents had given up on him long ago, labeling him as unfixable. But when he wandered into the center one afternoon, curious about the cars parked outside, something clicked. For the first time, he found a place where people expected more from him. Not because they thought he owed them anything, but because they genuinely believed he could rise above his circumstances. With patience and encouragement, James learned how to rebuild engines, and along the way rebuilt his sense of self-worth. Stories like these weren't rare. They happened every day, often in quiet, unassuming ways. A shy kid gaining confidence, a struggling parent finding stability, a lost soul rediscovering purpose. Each victory, no matter how small, added to the tapestry of change unfolding within the walls of the training center. But running such a massive operation wasn't without its hurdles. Funding remained a constant concern. While the CEO had provided significant support, the mechanic knew they couldn't rely solely on donations forever. So, he got creative. He partnered with local businesses to create apprenticeship programs, giving students hands-on experience while generating revenue for the center. He organized fundraising events, like car shows and charity auctions, which not only brought in money, but also strengthened ties with the community. And he reached out to government agencies and nonprofits, securing grants to expand the center's offerings. Despite the financial challenges, the mechanic refused to compromise on quality. Every tool, every piece of equipment, every lesson plan was chosen with care. He wanted the students to leave the center feeling prepared, not just to survive, but to thrive. That meant investing in top-notch resources, hiring skilled instructors, and constantly updating the curriculum to reflect industry trends. It was exhausting work, but he never lost sight of the bigger picture. His wife often teased him about how much time he poured into the center. "You're married to this place," she'd say with a laugh. But deep down she understood. This wasn't just a project for him. It was a mission. A way to give back to the world that had once helped him when he needed it most. And she supported him every step of the way, whether it was volunteering at events or simply reminding him to take breaks when he looked like he might collapse from exhaustion. Even the CEO stayed involved, visiting regularly to check on the center's progress. One evening, as they stood together watching a group of students test drive cars they'd repaired themselves, the CEO turned to the mechanic and said, "You know, I never imagined it would grow this fast." The mechanic chuckled. "Neither did I. But I guess that's what happens when you stop doubting yourself and start believing in others." The CEO nodded thoughtfully. "You've created something special here, something that'll last long, after we're gone." Those words stayed with the mechanic long after the CEO left. They reminded him of the power of legacy, not in the sense of leaving behind wealth or fame, but in the idea of planting seeds that would continue to grow and flourish. He thought about all the lives that had already been touched by the center and wondered how many more would follow. Would some of these students go on to open their own shops, teach others, start movements of their own? The possibilities felt endless. Late one night, as he locked up the center and headed home, he paused to look back at the building. Its lights glowed softly against the dark desert sky, a beacon of hope in an otherwise barren landscape. He thought about how far he'd come, from fixing broken-down cars on the side of a lonely highway to creating a place where dreams could take flight. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. When he finally crawled into bed beside his wife, she stirred slightly and murmured, "Another late night?" He smiled, pulling her close. "Yeah, but it's okay. This is what I'm supposed to be doing." She kissed his cheek. "I know, and I'm proud of you." As he drifted off to sleep, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for his family, for the community that had rallied around him, and for the strangers turned friends who had helped him build something extraordinary. Life still threw curveballs, of course, but he no longer feared them. Instead, he embraced them, knowing that every challenge was an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and kinder. And as the desert winds whispered outside, carrying the promise of tomorrow, he dreamed of all the lives yet to be changed. Because in the end, that's what mattered most. Not the accolades or achievements, but the connections forged, the hearts uplifted, and the futures rewritten.